What is it?
Well, it's called a randomizer, and it's fitted to the guidance systems and operates under a very complex scientific principle called potluck. Now, no one knows where we're going. Not even the Black Guardian.
Not even us.
Hello and welcome to the Randomizer Podcast. This is episode 40. We have bigenerated from episode 39. Hooray! Spoilers this time for every Doctor Who story up to and including the Giggle, which we will be obviously talking about in depth and obviously change the universe somewhat, so yay. Alright. I am Tim.
I'm Jazz.
And hello, dear wonderful podcasters. I am Stefan Adegbola, and I am very thrilled to be here.
Well, we're totally thrilled to have you, Bola. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bola and I worked together very recently on the stage production of Quiz, which I talked about a little at the time, and we were delighted to discover in the rehearsal room that we're both fans of Doctor Who, and Bola even had a fleeting appearance in, was it The Magician's Apprentice?
It was actually my first TV job.
Oh, wow.
About a couple of years after I left drama school, I'd worked more or less consistently in theatre. I'd done everything already by that point. I was really, really chuffed and grateful and lucky to have started at the West End. Then I worked at the Globe. Then I worked Fringe for a bit. I went to Edinburgh. I had a real sort of like whistle-stop tour of the theatre community. And so I said, well, I'm done now. Let's get on to telly. And it's just so happened that my very first TV job was indeed a newsreader, announcing that the planes had stopped in Series 9, Episode 1, The Magician's Apprentice, with Peter Capaldi as the Doctor.
Oh, how wonderful.
Cool.
Yeah, it was great. I was only there for a morning. I turned up in Cardiff. I got, sent to hair and makeup and did all of that sort of stuff. Had a chat with the second second assistant director who was looking after me. And I got sent to Hetty MacDonald, met her on set, big green screen with the desk there, because in those days you could sit down to tell the news. And I'll never forget, I said to Hetty, because she said, "Are you nervous?" I said, "Yeah, I'm a bit nervous because it's my very first TV job, and I'm actually a little bit of a Doctor Who fan myself." I obviously downplayed it because I didn't want her to think I was a nutter.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
like I said, I grew up in the wilderness years, and liking Doctor Who was not something that was popular or cool when I was growing up. So yeah, I sort of downplayed it, and she said, "Oh, that's great." And I did the whole scene with the bloody TARDIS in my eyeline and a Dalek on the other side.
Brilliant.
And I thought to myself, well, look, if I'm never on this show again, or if I stop acting now, then at least I can say I was in Doctor Who and I was in view of the TARDIS and the Dalek.
Nice. That's lovely.
I was on set with the TARDIS and the Dalek.
Yeah. You can just sort of nudge that towards the preferred truth where you were either in one or the other. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Excellent. No, that's brilliant. And, never say never. There's plenty more of it to come, thankfully. Yeah. So.
Oh, well, I was fuming. When I heard that there was a queer black actor playing Doctor, I was like, well, why isn't my phone ringing?
They missed me by one guy.
But Shutty's going to do a fantastic job, and I'm sure he's we all, I think now, I knew already that he was going to be brilliant. Mm-hmm. But now that we've all had a glimpse, I'm sure there's a lot of breaths have been taken. Yes. Calm, relaxed breaths have been taken.
At least half of the responses I read last night afterwards on Mastodon were people talking about his legs or his pants.
I'm not surprised. I mean, we were forced to look at them for I say forced.
Yeah.
Didn't mind too much.
Have we all, as agreed, are we all in our pants at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes,
great.
Indeed.
Lovely.
I will spare the YouTube viewers from witnessing that, though.
Yeah, I'm not planning to use the pictures from the Zoom, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, good.
Okay.
So,
the
pants creep into the show, it'll be okay.
Yeah, unless Charles stands up, in which case it's getting its own episode.
Right.
Obviously.
Yeah. It's like, well, you're a fan of horror, you said? You're a fan of horror, Chaz?
Okay.
Well,
we do know Russell likes to bring back his newsreaders, so, you know. It's like...
Well, indeed. I was so happy to see the return of Trinity Wells. I knew she'd turn back.
Yeah.
It's
like, but now she's an anti-vaxxer. Great.
No, that's the thing. I loved that little twist of Trinity Wells. Of course, the Doctor Who equivalent of Fox News presenter would be a sort of Alex Jones type reactionary figure.
Let's talk about Russell's sort of subtle parable about how the Giggle makes everybody think they're right all the time. Is it Twitter?
Subtle? I don't know what you think is subtle. That didn't seem subtle at all. The screens make everyone mad. That's I think that's pretty on the nose and clear.
Ironically, it ran just before the programme came on. There was that BBC advert with the cartoon kid with the square eyes and saying it's not actually that bad.
That's right. Yes,
and Russell was like, yes, it is.
I thought that was intentional. Actually, I was wondering if that if the schedulers had spoken to him or something.
Get the counter propaganda in first.
Yeah.
As soon as they started explaining, I thought, it's Twitter. It's so, it was like you could just tell his glee when he was writing this. And, he probably had an Elon Musk joke in there as well, but thought, nah, just be more subtle.
Well, it couldn't have been more subtle if he called it the why.
Yeah. What was great about that aspect of the plot was not least did it create chaos, because that's a perfect setting for the toy maker, and I'm sure we'll have a discussion about the adaptation of the name as well. But what was great was that not only did it provide a really wonderful explosion of chaos to introduce the toy maker properly, it was a lovely callback to what I think these specials have been doing throughout the last 3 weeks, which is that they were an anniversary special, a different kind of anniversary special. We didn't need the trappings of multi-doctors, although we sort of got that in the end. But we didn't need the trappings of multi-doctors and villains coming back. We'd already had that last year with the Centenary. We'd already had that with Power of the Doctor and the Guardians of the Edge and all of that sort of stuff. So what we had was a tonal callback to eras of Doctor Who. And of course, we've got a tonal callback here to the fact that Doctor Who always has and always will be parables. It's the devices, the magic door. We walk through the magic door, we explore this place, we learn about it, and through that we learn about ourselves. And let no one tell you, I'm going to bang on about this throughout the whole podcast.
Please do.
Let no one tell you that Doctor Who being political is somehow a perversion or new indeed, or some kind of besmirching of the legacy of this nebulous thing called canon or law or whatever word they want to hide behind.
It's been political since the very first episode when, with the struggle for power with the cave people.
Well, that's it. Ian literally says to one of the cave, I'm not sure which one it is, but one of the cave people, he says, "Together we are stronger." Now, if that's not a political statement, I don't know what is. The fact that we have an anti-hero, and I'm going back to an unearthly child here. We have an anti-hero, a person who we can't trust, but who we have to depend on. And he has to learn that he can be trusted as well as he can learn trust and learn and explore the universe through that. So Doctor Who has always been about that.
We get the beginning of the character in Fear Makes Companions of Us All in that story.
Exactly.
As well. I'm presuming we're allowed to talk about Unearthly Child nowadays. But,
listen, just because the grumpy old sod has decided that we can't watch the thing doesn't mean we can't talk about it. And frankly, let's be honest, are a bunch of Doctor Who fans really not going to be able to find and source their own versions of that particular story? I don't promote it or endorse it, but I know it's going to happen.
I'm getting my DVD copy framed right away.
It's a tantrum. He's throwing a tantrum. Yeah, it's a completely stupid tantrum as well, because he's lost it. He'll never have any goodwill now whatsoever. He is exactly the kind of person that was being satirized in that moment of the Giggle. He believes he's right. He's, if anyone's taken the time to go through the mad screed that is his ex Twitter handle, he is insane. He's it's all of the isms, it's all of the anger, it's all of the rage, and it's all of the self-righteousness and self-importance. I hope I don't get sued, but I mean, I'm happy to say that in court.
We have about 27 listeners, and I don't think Steph Coburn's one of them. So.
Even if this issue is resolved in the future, it will now forever be part of the history of the cultural history of celebrating Doctor Who, which is a shame, I think. It's a real shame.
We were talking about the way that political goes right back to the start of the programme even, and so I found a rather glorious video on YouTube, which was an hour of Doctor Who being political, and it was clips from all eras, and it's got a bit desperate at some points. Like any mention of power or strength got included, but there were, obviously you got the Green Death with its shocking environmental woke message that we can't have in this day and age. Oh, hang on, that was the 70s.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we've got even a few years later, we've got Terror of the Zygons, and we have the Doctor basically say, "Just stop oil."
Yeah, exactly.
Quite literally, he says, "Stop using oil."
When are you going to stop relying on this? Yeah, and there are countless examples, as this video kind of mostly proves. It's
people just reinvent Doctor Who in their own heads to fit their own viewpoint, political leanings, whatever, and they can't believe that it's this way, because in their head it's the other way.
That's what happens with cultural properties, especially when they become something as beloved and as sort of tied to a national identity. Let's call a spade a spade. Doctor Who is very much a British program, and I'm not saying that to that's not specifically a celebration of Britishness, nor is it a denigration of Britishness. No. It just is the truth. It comes out of a very specific moment, post-war moment, where the anxieties of post-war Britain were able to be explored through this science fiction program. And I don't even think they knew that they were doing that. Look at the Daleks. We all know what the Daleks are supposed to represent. We're talking 20 years. We're talking the parents, Verity Lambert's, would have had a memory of that. And Waris Hussein, the first director of Doctor Who was indeed a queer Asian person. These are people who had came from very, very specific backgrounds, had a lens of British culture, had experienced British culture through a particular lens of history, and then on top of that were given the opportunity to do something, to make their mark in their industry and tell a story and tell a variety of stories. So is it any real surprise that the stories that we came up with were stories that looked at worlds which had been had been destroyed or hurt by war and pain and hatred, or issues around generational conflicts, or looking at typical, even using like sci-fi tropes like Planet of Giants, which is actually the first environmental Doctor Who episode.
Yes, true.
Saying what are our anxieties here, and it's all very, very clear right from that first year of the program.
That's part of the glory of sci-fi, really, is it always reflects us at its best, as it were, if not at our best. And again, there it is, bang up to date with the Giggle, with everybody sort of suddenly being that guy.
It highlights their fears, but it also sort of emphasises and celebrates their optimism in a lot of ways. It's sort of, like you say, it's come from the 60s, we're come that white heat of technology, we're sort of all looking towards the future, in the same way things like Star Trek, but as I say, it's not shying away from issues that we have, be it the common market with the likes of the Peladon stories, or the environmental message in the Green Death, but then you'll get
and Planet of Giants. I'm a big Planet of Giants fan.
Yeah, of course.
I stand up for the little guy.
Oh, yeah,
Thank you very much.
I'll add in a boom tish and
enjoy the view. But I mean, you get the optimism of, like, say, Tom Baker when he's praising the human race for their sort of just this need to explore or whatever.
Compare that with Tennant's speech in the Giggle about this issue.
Well, I was about to say, because what's great is that there's a lovely honesty and openness to it, because he says, don't just blame the toy maker for this. The hatred and the anger and the fury, that's got to have come from somewhere.
I think that's the sort of ugly truth that it's really hard to face, is that I mean I think our brains are such that we do have fleeting thoughts that are terrible and we wouldn't want to voice or stand by, and the Giggle lets them all be voiced. So it's really hard to see a character as as positive as Kate Lethbridge Stewart suddenly being all ableist, and
God, that was that. I mean, I've got to shout, as is my profession. I've got to stand up for the actors. Every single member of the cast of the Giggle especially, but also all three. I was about to say serials. Gosh, all three episodes were absolutely outstanding, and that moment was it was chilling to think. Because as a fan, I'm watching it going, this is a legacy character. This is the Brigadier's daughter, the Brigadier, the lovely, good old Brig, who we all know and love. Saying, who's essentially another sort of stand-in for a fan, a certain kind of fan. Suddenly just turning on everyone, which, of course, if you want to read it that way, meta-narratively, it could also be a little comment on Russell knowing what the online discourse around this program in particular is like, and saying, guys, remember what we're here for.
Yeah. No, and it's effective. It's skillfully wielded, and I've actually never been the biggest fan of the character, and I find her quite flat.
Kate or the Brig.
Kate.
Right.
Kate. I find her quite flat as a character. That's far too harsh, but just that was lovely performance to see, because it was like, whoa, tear away the mask, and her, especially in the moment when she's recovering.
Yeah.
I thought that was
very
just beautifully played.
Very excellent playing.
It does sort of, what you say, it highlights that even the likes of, the best of us are it's possible for us to say go down that rabbit hole, and it sort of, it exposes, that sort of the underlying thing. It's not necessarily what you think, it's just all the spewing, all the bile that comes out of society.
There's a deeper conversation to be had, and I was slightly disappointed the episode didn't, because there was so much in it, it didn't have more time for the implications of the giggle and so on. But it's a great starting point. But it's also the way that we're, generally speaking, we're kind of absolutely terrified of any of our kind of fleeting dark badness being voiced, as if it suddenly defines us that we did one thing, and that taps into me to the kind of sometimes lack of nuance in conversations about rights and people vocalizing stuff that's problematic. And there's always a kind of, I think there's a kind of, it's still tribal, I think, that kind of tendency to just say, okay, bad, evil, you're done, you've done one bad thing. And I'm not saying we should sort of, forgive or wave it under the carpet, which is the opposite instinct. And you see those two camps yelling at each other, with nobody acknowledging that humans do have these prejudices and these fleeting thoughts, that largely our lives are a triumph of being better than that.
Russell T Davies' writing has always had that sort of subtext of, we're not perfect, but we're trying. And those of us who don't try, or those of us who allow ourselves to be led by the nose, will usually end up in a very dark place. Like, I don't think it's for nothing that a lot of his writing, whether it be on a range of topics, whether it be about queer history or queer culture, if it's about politics or the intersections between people, or it's Doctor Who, there's always, I've noticed in Russell T Davies' writing, there's always a warning of, we are only a hair's breadth away from fascism. We're only a hair's breadth away from turning into absolute monsters to each other. Well, there we go. Yeah, classic example. You could argue that it becomes his, what's that phrase when they say that someone's got their own thing? It's like they're not a gimmick, but it's like a
motif or something.
A motif, yeah. I would say that, yeah, you could argue that maybe that is something that, a gong that he keeps on banging, but why stop banging it? Because look at the world. Look what's going on. Look what's happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, because it does feel sometimes like we're a hair's breadth away from just absolute chaos,
carnage.
Yeah, and the hatred and the bile and even like we were seeing in the episode, just the general chaos, everybody thinking they're right, and that, I think that's what underpins a lot of his writing. You watch it and you recognise it, and that's why it scares you, because we're just 1 second into the future. You look at like Years and Years is a good example, you know. And I watched all that and I thought, I can see that timeline, you know.
Oh, Years and Years
I
was
see
terrifying to watch.
You know,
yeah.
And it was genuinely terrifying.
I think we're living in about episode 2 now, aren't we?
Yeah.
I actually haven't gone back to watch it because I can't.
Yeah, I know. It's one of those ones that I have meant to go back to, but I thought, no, I can't do this to myself.
It's the same with Torchwood, Children of Earth. There's another perfect example. You know, I cannot watch it. I honestly, I will never watch it again. And that's a testament to how good it is.
Yes.
Because I just the horror of realizing what that story was and what was going on, and the sheer futility that these aliens weren't even villains. They were just they're drug addicts. It was just absolutely harrowing, and I just thought to myself, and then of course the resolution to that story as well with what Jack had to do. I just said to myself, that was incredible, but I cannot put myself through that again.
There's a line in that where one of the government ministers says, when they're talking about who do we choose, and say, well, what are the figures? What was it?
I think it was 10% or something like that, or 5%.
Yeah, but it was the
numbers.
working class kids, or the
of course it was. It was the underachievers.
Gives a shit about, you know, and that chilled me to the bone because I was working in the school at the time, and we'd been discussing that, and I said, you can fucking guarantee that it would be real.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, because doesn't one of the cabinets around the table, she says, "What have we got school league tables for?" It's almost as if
the line,
as if the whole thing was preparation for something like this. They didn't know what they were going to do, but as a contingency, this is the kind of reason we keep these records.
The Peter Capaldi character, you know, when he goes home to his family, oh my god!
This was the moment for me. I've seen it quite a few times in fiction. It's the end of The Fog, if you remember the film. But it's spoilers for The Fog.
Which I haven't seen, so thanks.
Oh, right, yeah. In which case, sorry.
I knew it's an occupational hazard, it's fine.
You didn't even know that Peter Capaldi was in it, did you?
No, I didn't, no.
The Fog?
I've seen it in other places. It's part of that. It's almost always men, and it's that patriarchal thing of, oh, my poor family, I will kill them all because we can't face this thing together. And that just absolutely it terrifies and infuriates me all in one. And it's the loss of hope as well.
Well, yeah, because it's not, from what I remember, because like I said, I can't watch it again, but from what I remember, it wasn't portrayed in any way heroically. It was absolutely, it was just there. It was the tragedy version of the cherry on the icing, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah, but I think you've got that right for your own life, but you do not absolutely have that right for anybody else's child, adult or not.
I think you might. I'm not 100% sure because I can't remember The Fog that well, but I think you might be mixing it up with the end of The Mist.
Well, let's spoil 2 films for Bola.
Which I also haven't seen. So,
oh, so sorry.
But now you'll never know which, so maybe that makes
me,
that's a good point.
The Mist is one of the most horrible things.
Let's say no more about it to preserve your...
Thank you.
No, it's... I mean, I'm very sort of extreme about spoilers, and it's like that sort of... There's no real statute of limitations for some things in terms of how long you can expect.
Spoilers for Dr. Caligari.
If I'm allowed to be smilingly tangential, but at least it's still in the realm of fantasy and sci-fi. I saw Alien when I was 21 or 22 for the first time, and I hadn't had a single frame of it spoiled for me. Not even the chest burst. Not even the chest burst. Yeah.
I think I may have told this on the podcast before, but my dad and I were staying at my aunt's, who was off on her honeymoon in Edinburgh, a tiny little flat with only one bedroom, and so I was sleeping on the sofa, which was the room where the TV was, and this was pre-devices, so I was probably 10. We're talking like early or mid 80s, and Alien came on the TV, and my dad really wanted to watch it, and in a bit of wonderfully responsible parenting, he said, okay, you can watch it with me, but you've got to cover your eyes when I tell you. So I heard the chestburster scene, but it was fully 10 more years before I saw it. I was a good boy, I didn't peek.
Yeah, well, I have to say that was a real experience of joy, because I remember especially after Ash, the robot, played wonderfully by Ian Holm.
Another big
after
twist.
that's revealed. I remember I just turned to my friend and said, "This is the best thing I've ever seen," because of the exhilaration of what would have been by then a 30-year-old film that was incredibly popular.
Well, counterpoint for me is Citizen Kane. I'd obviously heard of this epic creative cinema, and partly so much time had passed, but also not only had I had the ending twist spoiled, I'd had it spoiled by a cartoon version of Ghostbusters.
Oh my god!
It's been one of those things.
Yeah, it was The Simpsons for me.
In media all over.
Cartoons got a lot to answer for. Yeah.
It's like episodes of Twilight Zone. You'll just see specific episodes seem to be like cross-media referenced all the time.
I think it's fair enough after X number of years, but I'm slightly judgmental on Mastodon of people who aren't still content warning their spoilers.
Sorry, by the way, what the hell is Mastodon? I keep
I'm
hearing
so sorry.
people say this word. I don't even fucking know what it is.
It's a social network that a lot of people left Twitter for.
Who is the old white guy in out of this trio? Because I've never bloody heard of it.
Well, welcome to another cultural angle.
I'll be honest, social media to me is just a waste of time now. I'm on a Discord, I am on X, but I never visit anymore. I kind of said to Tim, I'm sort of wanting to wait till literally Elon Musk, completely destroys it.
You just want to stay on the outskirts of Rome until the fire is licking at your feet. That's what
basically.
But, fiddling away.
I think once that's it, I'm just coming off because I can't be arsed with it anymore.
I use Mastodon only for the podcast. It's the difference it has is that it's what's called federated, so anybody can set up a Mastodon server and they can make sort of house rules for that. But there's a general, much more egalitarian kind of ethos to it. It's not centralized in the way that other social media is.
Sounds like Reddit then.
To an extent, although I believe Reddit's capable of being fairly toxic, and I don't have yet to hear of any kind of alt-right Mastodon servers or anything like that.
Right.
I think there may be kind of some sort of shared basic values, but I don't know. Maybe there are, and I've just not been exposed to them, which is the other great joy.
What's the other one like Reddit is absolutely hot? 4chan.
4chan, yeah.
Oh god, no, that one is that's a real dumpster.
Do you know there's an 8chan for people for whom 4chan isn't toxic enough?
Oh my god.
Right.
Yeah.
No, thank you.
I'm waiting for 16chan.
Trump's own one, what was it, Truth or something?
Oh god. Truth Social, yes.
Maybe somebody's law should be that anything that's named like Truth or something isn't.
Yeah. I was just about to say, yeah.
Avoid like the plague.
It's like that law about any headline that's a question can almost always be answered no.
No, yeah.
I love that one. So, and just as a point of principle, Bola, we're all about the tangents and the straying off topic.
I know. I've listened to the podcast.
Yes, good.
we have no real sort of we
plan.
just go wherever, even if.
I didn't realise we were going to get existential about it as well. I mean, goodness.
Well,
We like to think of the podcast as a mystical forest
Great.
that we're lost in. So, at the risk of belying my own principles, let's go back to the Giggle then.
We haven't even talked about the Star Beast or Wild Blue Yonder yet, have we?
I know. Well, why
Bloody
don't
hell.
we do that? Because, I mean, it would be absolutely fab to sort of hear your comparative thoughts on those. And also, actually, before we even do that, I wanted to ask you how you first got into Doctor Who, because you described yourself as a wilderness baby.
That's right, yes. So I was born in the mid to late 80s. I'm not going to say exactly when. So I actually, no, I tell you what, here's a little clue for your listeners. I was born after episode 3 of Delta and the Bannermen.
oh my god!
I know. So already
I was
started at the bottom.
At least some good came of that.
Then.
Yeah.
God.
So I was born in that during that season. I have vague memories of the actual end of Doctor Who. It was sort of something that was always on, but wasn't part of the family. Like it's not like it was something that united us as a family. That was God. So
You should rephrase it, Bola, and say you're born just in time for Dragonfire.
yeah, well, no, you see, here we go. First tangent of my story of how I got into Doctor Who. I insist that I am not, I certainly won't take on the label Whovian, because I hate it, because it sounds so faux academic, and I can't bear the pretension of it. So I insist on not calling myself a Whovian. But sometimes I don't even say I'm a Doctor Who fan, because the things that Doctor Who fans consider classic episodes and wonderful stories, most of them I think are terrible. And the ones that people call the worst ever of the season or the worst ever of anything, I often think, oh, this is really charming and lovely, and I can see what they were trying to do here, and I think there's actually mileage in this story. So I'm not one to go in for fan consensus. I do agree with a few stories and things, but for instance, I mean, we can all happily agree that the twin dilemma should be missing, but apart from that, I'm willing to give almost any other episode that's panned by Doctor Who fans a chance, precisely because Doctor Who fans hate it.
Orphan 55?
Do you know? I think even Orphan 55 has merit.
Jesus.
Absolutely.
It's only the last 2 minutes that I didn't like.
I mean,
Okay, fair enough. I walked into that one.
the thing with Orphan 55, and I think again this it helps. I'm really grateful now as an adult when I watch Doctor Who that I have an understanding of the industry and what it takes to make a television program. That that probably has a lot to do with why I'm a lot more lenient than fans, and I do believe that there is such a thing as fan entitlement.
Oh
God, yes.
absolutely.
And you've got to understand that making any television program is already extremely difficult, very, very, very time-consuming, energy-consuming, and deeply expensive. And when you have to make decisions on the fly for whatever reason, things don't necessarily turn out the way you want them to. So when a Doctor Who season or an episode goes awry, or there's an element of it that I think, that doesn't seem to be as coherent or doesn't seem to work so well for me, my first thought is what went wrong or what happened in the process of making this program a reality, because Russell T Davies, Stephen Moffat, Chris Chibnall will have written something in whichever year it is, and it's taken 18 months before that program is actually ready for broadcast, and in that time a hell of a lot of other people have handled this thing.
Which is why we now love hyphen with a 3.
With a 3, yeah. You know, because when things don't work, I then start to go, well, what were they trying to do?
Yeah.
The Web Planet, I think the Web Planet is one of the best stories, and I will die on this hill. I will go to my grave. The Web Planet is one of the greatest stories of the early years of Doctor Who.
It's one of the
because
bravest,
they were trying
for sure.
something so different.
Yeah, different. Yeah.
They were trying something different. Good on them. So it looks a mess. So one of the poor actors bumps into the cat. So what? So what? They had to film that thing in a day.
These were done like plays, you know. So
Yeah.
I totally get that. I mean, it is a story when I'm watching I've always, and I am a huge Hartnell fan, but it's a story I've always found dull and boring. But yeah, I mean, I use Orphan 55's like the red-headed stepchild that you just sort of, it's the stick to beat, to beat it with. And yeah, I make a lot of jokes about it, but no, I mean, I totally take that point. Taking it from that point of view, which isn't always easy, but if you can sort of, think it logically, it's a calmer way to view even what is considered, as you say, awful.
I think that's my personal Zedex, isn't it, really? Which is to remind myself that television is incredibly difficult and incredibly stressful to make. That's before we're even getting into the issue of how does the audience even respond to it. So, you're always making a gamble. You're always taking a gamble and taking a risk when you make a television program, not least when it's a sci-fi fantasy program, and not least when it's a sci-fi fantasy program that's been going for 60 years and has literally legions of fans.
Foaming at the mouth and ready to hate it.
Exactly. I try and take an approach of a compassionate approach to Doctor Who, because I think for every Orphan 55 or Warriors of the Deep or the Gunfighters, for instance, and by the way, the Gunfighters is also one of my favourites. But for every one of those, you got to think we have a Caves of Androzani, we have a Genesis of the Daleks, we have a Curse of Fenric, you know, and there will be people who will say each one of. I'm sure there'll be one person in the world who is a Doctor Who fan who will say Curse of Fenric, dog shit. Genesis of the Daleks, too long. What was the other one I said? Caves of Androzani, overrated. I'm sure there's bound to be.
I'm not the biggest fan of Fenric, actually. It's
right.
It's true, but I can map what you're saying about making TV onto the theatre experience, which obviously you'll know as well. It's that kind of that striving and that effort and that love and blood and sweat and tears that goes into producing something which actually sometimes there are flaws in it. Sometimes it's you love it past any flaws, and there's no perfect show, but there are some that are more perfect than others. But it's always made with huge effort and often huge love, and I see that in Doctor Who, and I think it's one of those traps of fandom is we kind of love to hate it or love to criticize it and pick it apart, and it's definitely worth always, like you say, get your own Z-Dex and wear that armband and be compassionate as you slag Time Lash off or whatever.
Oh God, I'd completely forgot. I'd actually erased Time Lash from my memory. So yes, I'd say Time Lash and Colin's first episode.
When you go back into our archives, which I know you will do, we got Time Lash as a random story to rewatch, and we had such fun. Yeah. That episode's called Paul Darrow's Teeth Marks. Yeah.
I'm going to give it a try.
The thing that I find was, I mean, we don't always achieve it, but we, even if we don't like something, or we are not entertained as much by it, we do tend to sort of slag it for comic effect, and stuff like that. But
which I have no problem with. I think we should.
It's all coming from a place of love. We adore the show. We want it to be good. We know sometimes it's not, but it's accepted, and it's just like fun. Like, for example, when Wild Blue Yonder were talking about the CGI and stuff, and I sort of said, well, it's Doctor Who, you expect it to be ropey somewhere, and stuff like that. And this is always my thing about the show. If I'm having fun, then that's my litmus test.
100%.
It has to be fun. I always just say, when I said to our pal Kenny, it stopped being fun, Doctor, like Keegan said, and it's true. What if it's not fun? Why are we watching? And it can be the shittest, most awful thing.
Just say Time Lash and be done.
But you can be just entertained by the sheer audacity of it. It's mental, and that's how it should be.
So I'm one of those fans who doesn't do rewatch of the whole thing, cyclical from 63 up to present. I can't bear that. So what I do is I pick periods. And at the moment I'm watching I'm doing a sort of like internal comparison between the Hinchcliffe and the Williams, because it's kind of like that's like a very good clear battleground, and has been for decades.
They called it the Style Wars.
Yeah, exactly. And what I've noticed is that I'm finding, well, last week or the week before, I was watching The Brain of Morbius, and I sat there rapt. I thought to myself, oh my God, this is actually one of the best stories that I've watched in a long time. It was superb acting, deftly written, incredible attention to detail of the story logic. And then it was followed by The Seeds of Doom, which is also another classic in inverted commas, and I was bored the whole way through. The only thing I really enjoyed was Harrison Chase, because he was camp as Christmas.
He's absolutely brilliant. Funny enough, David and I, we were talking about Scobie,
Boise
Chance,
to me.
Boise.
Yes.
Yeah, and just what a absolutely brilliant henchman he is.
He's a
one
great
of
character.
That man
he's
can
one of those
hench.
few henchmen
Yeah.
that sort of stand out in Doctor Who, It's a difficult story because it's sort of two separate stories joined together.
But that's my point, which is that you look back on a period, and the fan consensus can be one thing, but my actual internal response to something will be 100% to do with whatever's going on with me at that time in my life, what my tastes are. Is something. Here's another thing. As I've gotten older, I find watching gory and violent things actually really difficult. Not because I'm against it in principle. I'm not Mary Whitehouse, but more simply, I actually respond to that too viscerally. I'm too, to borrow the term that people don't like, triggered. I'm actually triggered by that. Nothing to do with any trauma or hurt or upset or pain. Just simply, I don't like to see it. So I don't want to.
I found as I've got older, when I was younger, I watched gore. Ooh, it's great. But I don't care for it that much. That much now. I would prefer something to set my senses on edge. Sort of the creepiness. It's why
I agree.
I love horror. I love ghost stories now more than anything, because it's that. You watch like a Mike Flanagan thing, like Fall of the House of Usher or Blythe Manor, and it's the sense of dread, and that is, I think it's just taste. The older you get, you sort of go through, especially when you're younger. Gore is always a thing because you want to be a bit edgy and stuff, but I just think.
But there's nothing to say that it's necessarily even a straight line of progress, is it? Because
absolutely.
Because you might go back to watching that and find it absolutely fine in 10 years' time. There's nothing to say. I think the rigidity. I think this is probably why I say that I'm not a fan. I find fandom not just obviously I love Doctor Who, but Doctor Who was my wife, but Star Trek's my mistress. In that I absolutely love all of it.
Yeah.
But there are things that I tend to cling to. But I won't call myself a fan of any of it because I find that hegemony tends to take over. People tend to ossify into this version of this thing. There's enough of us who shout loudly enough for us to say that this means it's good and this means it's bad. So this is now the orthodoxy. I can't be doing with any of that.
I think that's lessened a bit, actually. Certainly because Chaz and I both kind of came into fandom, and I have a distinct memory of a kind of dividing line in my enjoyment of Doctor Who, which is exactly when I got into fandom and sitting around with other people and talking about it. And as it happened, the first story I saw when I discovered fans was Time in the Rani. And
There you go.
Again, it's another one I've gone back to for the podcast and had a great time. It's got huge flaws, but it's got huge merits as well. But you have to be so categorical about these things in fandom, especially when I think you're growing and you want to fit in, and you're looking to people around you for how to be and what to do. And it's like the edginess of horror films. It's like everybody wants to be different, so we're all the same being different.
Yeah, I think that whole perceived fan wisdom and stuff at the beginning, like you say, you get into it, but the more I've gone on in my enjoyment of anything, like be it Star Wars, Doctor Who, Rick and Morty, whatever, the one defining thing all the way around is fandom can be incredibly toxic, and I just don't want to be.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, you were saying about Whovian, it's an absolute. To me, I just absolutely horrified by that.
I should say for the record, though, that if someone does identify with that, that's absolutely fine.
I just think it's a clumsy word.
But it's also...
It's just sort of not to my taste, yeah.
No, I mean, that's absolutely fair enough. It's just... I mean, I make a joke when I say, well, fans, or as I like to call them, wankers, it's just generally, I always had this disconnect with it. I don't think myself is any better. I just
We're in that group.
want to engage in that nonsense.
Here's another bit of sort of mini story time. I think I must have been about 50. Yeah, I know exactly when I was. I was 15 because it was a month or two before I nearly gave up Doctor Who for good. I went to the only fan attended event in my entire life, where there was a showing of Sharda, and at this point, all we'd had, I can't remember which version of Sharda had been out yet. I think all we'd had was the VHS with Tom Baker doing linking narrations. And I went to this event, and it was on at the BFI in London. There was a Q&A afterwards with someone who had worked on the production. I can't remember. He was very junior, so he'd worked on a very junior role, and he'd brought his own Super 8 camera to the production and shared some home videos that he'd taken. And there was one of Tom Baker. There was a sort of clip of Tom Baker being very angry because he was caught smoking in costume, all that sort of stuff. And I found it fascinating. And then afterwards, there was sort of milling around, and I'd gone on my own, and I started seeing all these, fans and people. I think a lot of them must have known each other. And again, this is still early days of the internet. It's pre-internet, actually. So I wasn't sure, what was etiquette or how to start a conversation with another person who liked Doctor Who at this event, where I could have easily brought a friend, but no one who I knew, who was in my age group or was a friend of mine, enjoyed Doctor Who. They all absolutely hated, why on earth would they sit through this thing? Some of it was in black and white, for God's sake. They wouldn't, they wouldn't touch it with a barge pole. Yeah. And so I was really nervous, and I thought to myself, well, at least there'll be other Doctor Who fans there, so hopefully I'll be able to, get into some conversation or something. I stood around for half an hour, and it was probably one of the loneliest moments I'd ever had. And I thought to myself, I don't understand. This is a thing that we all like, and they're all laughing and joking. But when I come up and sort of stand there, I get looks, or I get this sort of tension or sense of what are you doing? You can't sit with us. And so I suppose that was probably a formative experience enough for me to say, well, I don't want to identify with that. And I've always had that sort of mistrust or antipathy towards fandoms that become so insular that they can't actually see the wood for the trees and remember that it's just a fucking TV program, for God's sake, guys. At the end of the day, we're just all just geeking out over a TV show. That's okay.
Yeah. No, that's harsh, especially at 15. Let's go back to your story of your kind of discovery of Doctor Who and getting into it.
Yeah. So I was born shortly after Delta and the Bannermen. I grew up with Doctor Who not really being a thing in the house, but by that point, because it was sort of part of the culture, there'd be a clip on, say, Auntie's Bloomers and things like that. The blooper reel show where they'd show Sylvester McCoy tripping up during recording Silver Nemesis, things like that. So I'd be like, oh, okay, I know what that is. I just don't necessarily know the details. And then, of course, I remember I must have been about 6 or 7, and Dimensions in Time, the fan favourite, of course, famous fan favourite, Dimensions in Time, was on Children in Need, and I remember that. So, for me, Doctor Who was an idea from the very beginning. It wasn't this tangible thing that I could hark back to a specific time in my life. I was never filled with nostalgia watching Doctor Who. So I was just sort of viewing it as this cultural item that was around for a long time and then went away, but is still sort of in the consciousness. And then, of course, 1996 came round, and we had the TV movie, and I remember watching that on broadcast, and I tell you what, I loved it. I was 8, I think, 8 or 9, and I absolutely loved it. Well, looking back now, there's a really good example of that in reverse. I think there are flaws, lots, major flaws in that story, and if it's not too harsh of me to say, I'm glad it wasn't picked up for series. But I still appreciate the effort that they put into giving it some kind of weight and depth
Yeah.
Maybe the ideas were messy. Maybe they weren't quite sure of what they were doing when it came to execution. But hey, they were trying something. And I really, really appreciated that.
Thinking of two quotes, which is one is from Steven Universe, which is a gorgeous cartoon series.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Yeah, I'd heartily recommend it, but it's been mangled in its viewing order, and the plot is such that you absolutely have to make sure you get a list of the order to watch them in. But anyway, was an episode where Stephen's father, Greg, takes him to the next state, and Stephen's a young kid who's tremendously excited about this, but they end up in a fairly shonky motel where his dad goes off to do a kind of legal but iffy deal for something or other, and he comes back with pizza. He reveals this pizza, opens the box, and it's filling the box. It's square pizza, and Stephen's like, square pizza, what's wrong with this state? And Greg says, my son, there will come a time in your life where you learn to appreciate any pizza. And that's how I feel about Doctor Who sometimes.
Absolutely. I think, I mean, I had a friend, so going back to sort of like my introduction to Doctor Who, I had a friend. He was sort of like my my pusher, and he
Brilliant. Was the first one free?
Yeah. He had videos of Logopolis and Caves of Androzani, and those fan favourites. Actually, I don't think Logopolis is a fan favourite, but anyway, I watched things with him, and then I realised that the reason I was enjoying it was different to why he was enjoying it. So I sort of stopped watching it with him, went away and did some other things. I started to discover that I was interested in acting, and then went back to it. So always throughout my life, I've been watching Doctor Who as a sort of observer rather than being invested in what some people might call canon or lore or what the rules of the program are. I've always just been interested in, okay, there's a character called the Doctor, and I say that very specifically, a character, not a man. They have this machine, which is bigger on the inside. It takes them anywhere in time and space, and they usually travel with human companions to show it to them and to learn. And they'll deal with whatever they have to deal with when they arrive. That's it. That's all I'm interested in. If you want to then tell stories based on Greek myths, or if you then want to look at political problems that are going on in the world or in the country, if you want to use it as whatever cipher you want, that's okay, because I realised Doctor Who for me was great because it was a great vessel for stories, and I'm a storyteller. That's my heart chain to Doctor Who, because while I can get giddy over the geeky stuff, and if I hear 5 rounds rapid, I know exactly what that means and all of that sort of stuff. Yeah, sure, that's great. I get a little squee moment, but really, I'm just really watching it because I'm going, what story are we getting today? What are we getting this week? Yeah. That's all I care about.
Yeah, that's lovely. You've sort of managed to avoid the whole trap of growing up with it in a way, which is, obviously it's something that a lot of people have had embedded in their childhood, but then we have to get over the man-baby stage of saying, my childhood's being changed or destroyed or disrespected somehow.
Yeah.
Jesus, the amount of that. Oh.
But like the Giggle, I think we should be able to admit that we do have that to get over, even if it's a genuine feeling that comes from a human place of a thing we love being made different. Change. Change is scary.
Ironic in a show like Doctor Who, which is
all about
which could only have happened if change was going on. Do you know what I mean? Like it could only.
Its DNA is all about. Change,
I mean, if you think of
change,
it not only is its DNA all about it, I mean, say fundamentally it's about that, because the very first, sorry, Steph, but the very first episode is about the world as viewed by these two humans being 100% upended.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a joke on Reddit that Doctor Who has never been the same since the policeman walked past the camera.
Brilliant. It all went downhill from there.
Yeah, it all went downhill from there. From the moment they stopped focusing on that I Am Foreman guy.
Yeah.
I actually think that second little swirl in the early title sequence
right.
The beginning of the end.
My friend Davies is one of these people that they watch some, it should be, say, 6 episodes, stop it there while it's good. And he's right in a lot of ways, but I always say with Doctor Who, because obviously big fans, and I say it was never as, they should have really cancelled it. after the gate shuts, or in the opening titles, because it wasn't as good as it used to be.
Yeah, yeah,
But,
exactly that.
Yeah, it's just
Yeah, I mean, and I had that. I've had that with all of those things. I don't, I've never been particularly. I'm more nostalgic. If I'm nostalgic for anything, it's a song, because I feel like songs, when they're released, especially if they're pop songs, they are very much saying, "This is now." So I don't normally tend to get very nostalgic over films, TV programs, anything like that, because essentially, for me, it's about what's the material. Not how warm I felt when I was wrapped up in it one time.
Yeah. Is this a way to lead into talking about Spice Up Your Life then?
Well, there's another Russell T Davies trope: a villain, camp villain, dances to pop song while torturing people.
Yeah. I think
what a great
we got
motif.
to nod to Gibnall doing Rasputin as well, which was
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it all references itself, doesn't it? Because
totally.
the master danced to Scissor Sisters. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, I loved that. Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic.
Loved it.
It's part of what makes me a bit edgy, actually. Right back to Toxic and End of the World.
Yes,
A bit like, we're doing pop music in Doctor Who now, and Eccleston's doing head dancing.
Yeah.
Well, again, I might have to remind you that pop music in Doctor Who is not new. In 1965's The Chase, we did indeed have the Beatles singing Ticket to Ride. So
Damn it, I found my Fox News margin.
Yeah, but none of the Earthly Child with John Smith and the Common Men.
Oh, of course, yeah. Well, that was the timeline being changed, because of course John Smith and the Common Men would have been the Beatles, but Doctor Who swooped in.
And the Common Men is obviously the Doctor, John Smith. He's at some point in some incarnation he's made a band.
Yes, true. Good point.
In the expanded media, there was a pop singer, a punk singer called Johnny Chess, who turned out to be the son of Ian Chesterton.
Nice.
I think that was a Paul Cornell invention. I'm not sure.
Well, if the job of fandom is to try and impose order on chaos, let's hear more of your story of becoming if not a fan, then a dedicated follower
An
of Doctor Who.
aficionado.
I would say that's it, really. Actually, that's about it. I mean, after my sort of teen years, I just sort of watched it. Really, I started buying my own videos and finding out, and so I watched it all out of order as well. So it never bothered me contradictory stuff happening in Doctor Who. I remember watching. I think it must have been the Dominators, and there's a bit where they're scanning him, and they say that his heart is fine. And I go, oh, he's only got one heart, but that's the second Doctor. So that sort of fan retcon of, oh yes, if he only had one heart because in Hartnell's time he only had one heart as well, didn't he? And some fans try and wedge, saying that his first regeneration was when he developed the second heart. And I think, well there's the Dominators. Don't start doing this thing of trying to make everything nice and neat and tidy, because essentially in 1968 he had one heart, and in 1970 he had two.
The show's had a trajectory of not giving a fuck about continuity to giving too many fucks about continuity and back again.
Yeah.
Fans have got this thing about wrapping everything in a neat bow.
That's fun, though.
Yes, absolutely fucking insane.
I think like many things, it's fun until it's trite.
Yeah. Stephen Moffat, actually, I think it was in Day of the Doctor, wrote that the first two Doctors were colourblind.
Yes.
Because they're black and white.
He puts that in the Target novelisation. That's right. Yeah, I think that's a lovely, fun little thing.
I loved it. I mean, I kind of love that he does these things, because they're more piss takes than actual.
It's playfulness.
But it's like the way people get infuriated by things like that, and you think, you're just missing the point of this show. If you're getting infuriated by that, then really watch something else and calm down.
Not about infuriation, it's about enjoying the then ludicrous puzzle of trying to square the circle. So I think in this case, Bola, the Dominators just had a shit scanner.
Yeah.
But see, that's headcanon I can get behind.
There you go. Headcanon is more fun than complaining about the differences.
So don't start me on unit dating.
Well, listen, I see. There's my second joke of the day that I had stored up, because I was at some Christmas drinks the other night, and lo and behold, one of the raging debates on the bathroom walls in this pub was started by the question, what's your opinion of the unit dating controversy?
No way.
I'm going to send it to you on WhatsApp.
Oh,
Is this the
brilliant.
Doctor Who pub in London where they all...
No.
That's right.
This wasn't in London. It was a completely random pub in, it must have been Bath that week. Yeah.
I'm hanging around all the wrong toilets.
And I said, well, listen, if you want to know which are the right toilets to hang around, stick with me, kid. But,
It's not that sort of unit dating.
yeah.
Doctor
Hello,
Who
Mike
fans
Yates.
are definitely a legion, aren't they? Jesus.
You'll find debate on this on our dear beloved show anywhere.
All media.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
Oh dear. We haven't had the Shada toilet door version yet. That could come. Brilliant. So let's go to your thoughts of the specials then, Bola.
Okay, so my overall opinion, what a absolute tour de force. I thought each and every one of them was enjoyable, witty,
Yeah.
dark, tense, beautiful, some really tender moments. In terms of plotting and details, things like, David Tennant being back or that face returning, and the meta crisis. I was curious to see how that would be worked around, but I knew that it would have to be hand waved away. That whatever the solution was going to be was going to have to be some kind of hand wave, because you can't set up someone will die. You can't set up something so final and so devastating and terminal and then retract it without some kind of hand wave. Essentially, that's just the mechanics of storytelling.
You just want it to be a good hand wave, a twirly
exactly.
one.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, the play on binary I thought was an absolutely lovely twist on
I like that as well.
on that moment, because there's no way that Russell T Davies thought in 2008 when he wrote, it would have been 2007 when he wrote that he was thinking, oh yes, this is a nice little thread that we can use in 15, 16 years time. Of course not. Of course not.
We were talking about that in the writer's tale, how, he sort of writes something, in 2006, and then come 2009, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Tug on that thread, and it's wonderful.
I haven't read The Writer's Tale, but I do read Elizabeth Sandifer's work, and she heavily, there was a big resource for her when she was covering the first era of RTD's tenure as showrunner. It came as no surprise, let's put it this way, because by that point I'd already started working. It came as no surprise that I noticed that it was a technique of his to write something that seemed suitably mysterious and thread dangly, that he would just leave there and think, okay, in a few years' time, I can use this. It's not necessarily the case that he was going to use everything that he left as a thread, but you can see that lovely synthesis happening in season 4, because he picks up on a lot of little threads that he'd left here and there throughout the first 3 seasons, that he thought, oh, I can tie this in and that in. Oh, now I can use Archangel again. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And speaking of which, that was a great little serendipity, because Wilfred Mott was never intended to be Donna Noble's grandfather. It's just because they unfortunately lost, I forget his name, brilliant actor, Howard something. Howard Atwell, that's it. Yeah, who was unable to. It became clear that during filming that he wasn't able to carry on.
I think this is actually in the writer's tale as well. So.
Yeah. Brilliant little, just a little touch of,
from a tragedy came a wonderful thing.
Yeah, very much.
I was so glad to see Wilf at the end of Wild Blue Yonder as well.
Oh, it was very sweet. Very sweet.
I was saying to Tim, but the thing with Wilf is that all fandom, say classic fandom, new fandom, or just in general, they agree about nothing with the one exception, and that is Bernard Cribbins is just...
I think that's because he was such a wonderful, magical, impish person.
Everybody's granddad.
He was a doctor himself, in a way. Yeah. He almost very nearly wasn't he? He was offered the fourth Doctor.
Yeah, that's right. He's on the Cushing DVDs for the second film. He talks about when he went to interview for it, and he said, "Oh, I've been in the army. I can do parachuting. I can do fighting." And they're like, "Oh no, the Doctor's not going to be like that." And then he tunes in to see Tom Baker punches.
Yeah.
It's a funny point, but I think it's true. I have not heard a bad word Although I tend not to seek out the dark corners of fandom, so there's got to be out there. Last episode, we ran a competition to find someone who didn't like Wilf.
And how many of the 27 answered?
One.
Davey, he turned up, but as I say, I told him that it was just a ruse.
I think he was lying.
Yeah, I was about to say, yes. More like a trap, a honey trap.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly that. I agree with what you're saying about the specials as a whole. They've been such a treat. And if I have a kind of loose overall opinion, I think it's that, as I sort of feared or anticipated, the Giggle was my least favourite on the first impression, because it's... You can't do justice to all this setup without some hand waving, and I think also it was kind of very much it could have done with being 3 stories all by itself almost.
Well, yeah, it did feel like a sort of condensed season of 10 or 13 episodes, didn't it? Really.
Yeah, certainly. Yeah, I think Russell's like, I've got all my favourite toys, and I'm going to try and do everything with them,
which is fine, absolutely, as he should. For a big celebration of the 60th anniversary.
It chimes very strongly with me what you're saying about a different sort of celebration, because we talked a lot last night about the kind of the sort of tyranny of expectation, I suppose, and the fact that while there aren't rules for what an anniversary story or stories must have, there are expectations and precedent, and those can be. Can lead to disappointment that's in no way connected to the stories themselves.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've no interest in seeing Smith and Capaldi and Whittaker and Tennant and possibly a second Tennant teaming up.
They couldn't afford the split screen budget. That's why.
Yeah, I don't need. Multi-Doctor. I think Capaldi's absolutely right when he's as in we're talking the actual actor Peter Capaldi's absolutely right when he said that. They lose their potency the more you have. It's a diminishing return.
Well, watch out, David Tennant now then.
Well, quite. Sorry, I had this terrible. That I thought that's a pun and a half. The diminishing return of David Tennant. Firstly, the question is always, what story do you need to tell here? If you're going to bring these characters back, and then secondly, I then think, how are you going to square this with the section of your viewership, be they fans or not, who want to make it fit with their linear understanding experience? So you're giving yourself that nightmare. And then finally, how much is too much? Because with a show like Doctor Who, throwing the paint at the wall is you're going to come up with a Jackson Pollock. I don't think you can expect to have Daleks, Cybermen, the Master, the Rani, the Monk, the Zabi, and the Garm all teaming up.
Yes, the Garm. I want the Garm.
God, don't mention the bloody Garm.
All teaming up to destroy the universe, and that only the 7th, 8th, 9th, 12th, 15th, and a future Doctor can. It becomes soup.
But you need the Taran Woodbeast to save the day.
That's the line. I want to
see the Scarison up against one of the dinosaurs from Invasion of the Dinosaurs. That's what I want to see.
This is why the good Lord gave us fanfic.
Yes, quite. Yeah.
Or indeed, Big Finish.
After the Giggle, I think after that shot of the Giggle with David Tennant and Ncuti Gatwa, I think there's going to be a hell of a lot of fanfic out there.
Yeah. The slash writes itself.
Quite right. Yeah, literally.
Oh my God.
Oh, lovely stuff. How did you feel about Wild Blue Yonder? Because I think that's my favourite as it stands at the moment.
I think in terms of tone, for sure, Wild Blue Yonder is, without doubt, it was the creepiest, it was the weirdest, it was the one that gave the strongest sense of uncanny and don't know what to do, and fear. I mean, as soon as the Doctor stuck the Sonic into the keyhole, I knew exactly what was going to happen. I said, right, there we go. It's going to be one of these ones where the Doctor's stripped of everything, which immediately I'm interested in, because I think devices like the Sonic Screwdriver, more recently Psychic Paper, I think they're great because they're shorthands. They get us from point A to B without 25 minutes of escape and recapture, which is what, let's be honest, a lot of the pacing of the classic series had to have.
You always quote this thing, Chaz, of Russell saying there's nothing more boring than a locked door. I think that's not true. I think you can absolutely tell a story, but without something like the Screwdriver, then you do have to tell it every week almost.
Well, I guess you can turn what Russell T Davies, that quote you just used, on its head and say, well, yeah, what's more interesting than the locked door? The people inside who are trapped.
Yeah. It's an escape room now.
Yeah.
You can have a sort of cell scene like they had in, say, Day of the Doctor, things like that. But I agree, you know, what you said, you know, the Sonic and the paper are shorthand, but they have get to the point now that they do whatever the plot requires them to.
There have been times of that, yeah.
David Tennant sort of making, you know, walls up.
It's almost back to the days of where the first job of the writer is to stop them just getting in the TARDIS and getting out of there.
Yeah. I mean, at least it took a while. At least he couldn't just zap,
Yeah.
you know, just zap it out of nowhere.
It's like, hold on, Dalek Supreme.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's no way with the, you know, a horde of great vampires that he's going to be able to use the Sonic to fly off.
No, they move quite slow.
Well, that's true. Good point. Yeah, and of course, it wasn't completely impenetrable. It's just with a lot of artillery, it did actually shatter.
It looked good, but like
I probably know an energy weapon would have gone bush straight through.
Sure, but and here's the thing, like, you know, again, yeah, they're shorthands, and I sort of believe that everything's on a sort of scale. Taking the Sonic is taking it away, like it disappeared in Wild Blue Yonder with the TARDIS. That sort of version is one extreme of the scale where it's Peter Davison, no more sonic screwdriver. That's one extreme.
Also, more mourning than for Adric.
Quite. Well, to be fair, Adric wasn't dead yet, to be fair. But so we weren't to know the extent of the Doctor's contempt for Adric quite at that point. But then the opposite is, of course, you know, just waving the Sonic at a computer and suddenly realizing, you know, that having downloaded all of the information direct into the Doctor's head. Sure, that's a scale. And essentially, the scale has to be where you sit on the scale in that week's story has to be relatively appropriate to the kind of story you're telling, to the tone. If you're telling a story about, I don't know, something that's incredibly emotional, you don't want to sit there and spend 3-4 minutes working out how to unlock how to crack a code so that we can move on to the next part of the story.
Unless it's intrinsically interesting, like in Pyramids of Mars.
Or, well, God. Well, I mean, I can't sit through that final episode of Pyramids of Mars.
I love that stuff. Having said that, I haven't watched it for a long time.
I would say Pyramids of Mars fails.
Story.
Oh, really? Oh, excuse me for saying this then. But I would say that episode 4 of Pyramids of Mars fails where episode 4 of The Stones of Blood succeeds. Because The Stones of Blood is a complete tonal shift to this legal, but it's a parody because it understands what it's doing is genre play. Whereas Pyramids of Mars,
got Douglas Adams at the helm as well.
Well, exactly. I'm sure that was in no small part.
That
due
was
to its
my other
success.
quote actually that I keep thinking about, just to hark back to our discussion of how our perceptions change over time as fans. Was Adams had a thing about if it's in the world when you're born, it's just part of the normal natural order of things. If it's invented before you're 30, it's new and sexy and exciting, and maybe you can have a career in it. And if it's invented after you're 30, it's wrong and unnatural and work of the devil.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, that's very true. But also, like what I was saying about Pyramid of Mars, it gets back to that thing that you were saying about not viewing Doctor Who through a different lens. I mean, I do view it sort of as an overall thing and can detach myself, but I do still have a warm, fuzzy, nostalgia because I remember watching it when I was little and stuff. So it does have more in terms of that particular story I have a love for, but I can sort of stand back from it and look at it and think, like every other story, it's not perfect, and resolution wise and so on, there's a lot of these great stories that if you spend about 10 minutes on it, you can easily deconstruct them.
Yeah. To take it back to the specials, what we had was a range of what Doctor Who can be. I think that was very clear. And that's what I meant about a different kind of celebration. I think Russell T Davies has always been more interested in the emotional beats and the tone of a story being told than the nitty-gritties of who did what when and which face the Doctor had.
Yeah.
And so
I like to think that there's a fan in a basement somewhere whose spreadsheet is just melted.
Seriously.
absolutely, yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
right.
Like, I mean, the fact that of all of the classic companions to put into the 60th, he put Melanie Bush, who I absolutely adore, because I think to myself, who the fuck is Mel? We had no idea who she was. We were told she was a computer programmer from Pease Pottage, and then she was just there. We had no introductory story. We had no... I mean, I've got my own personal headcanon for Mel, but we had no introductory story. We had no departure story from what happened between the end of... You know, where does Trial of a Time Lord even sit in her personal timeline? All that sort of stuff. You know, like...
How old was Glitz when we first met him? If he died at 101.
101.
She's the most timey-wimey companion of the classic game.
sure.
For sure.
And if you want some actual sort of like expanded media stuff, this is hilarious when you think about it. But they actually wrote Mel's introduction story with the Sixth Doctor, and it was a toy maker story.
Hey.
Right. Well. I wouldn't be surprised if Russell T Davies was referencing that then. I wouldn't be at all surprised.
Yeah.
I was delighted to see Bonnie back, actually. I've gone completely 180 on Mel.
She was written terribly.
And it was not a happy time. You know, she was brought in the midst of all of the stuff that was going on with the post-hiatus and the troubles between John Nathan Turner and Eric.
But I think it's also difficult because the actress herself had been in programs that had reputations, you know, with the characters she played. So you just had these sort of I suppose expectations or just cliches in your head about this actress. So she was sort of hated before she even appeared.
I remember when Catherine Tate was when it was announced that she was coming back, and I remember it was. What you're talking about, describing, sounds exactly like what I remember the response was to Catherine Tate coming back. It was she's fine for the one episode, but she can't be coming back being a real companion. And I remember thinking to myself as well at the time, going, "Hang on a second, give her a chance. Yeah. We've had 2 companions by Russell already. Yeah. We know he can write good characters. You know, I'm sure he'll do something good with this." And of course, she had her renaissance.
I remember Kenny and I high-fiving each other when we found out she was coming back, because
right.
I was so pleased, you know. I thought, oh, great, she's going to be wonderful.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I think the sad thing about Mel, the reputation that you just described preceded her. The program itself was not in a healthy way.
No.
Behind the scenes, and viewership. You know, the BBC was not promoting it. The BBC wanted shot of it. And actually, talk about visual jokes. Here's one that I noticed. The minute I saw it, go back and look at watch the opening scene. The scene of the Giggle where the Doctor and Donna go back to 1925 to go to Mr. Emporium's shop, and you'll notice that the shop right next to the godlike being who is attempting to destroy the universe is a television repair shop named Grades.
Yeah.
Grades. All right. I thought you'd have done the magpie joke again.
No, and I thought to myself, that's naughty. There's no way that hasn't been that's if it's not Russell's joke, it's the art director's joke or someone. Yeah.
Bola, I think we got to have you back, because I think we could literally, we've got a whole of 60 years to catch up on, not just 3 specials.
I would absolutely adore that.
It's been a fascinating conversation so far.
Chaz, we've got a new drummer for the band.
Well, I was just going to say, I think it's great to have like this sort of cross-generational...
I feel old now.
Well, also...
Well, I feel the oldest.
Where I was actually going to go with it is that what's really interesting is the insight of where we come from with this program, because obviously, you know, we're all 3 very different careers and 3 different backgrounds, and we associate with a particular period. And The Wilderness is actually, I would say, one of the more interesting ones, just because it wasn't on.
I think it's one of the most creative.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, no, we've got the whole territory of those years to talk about. And, well, I'll wrap us up for now, and we know it's unfinished business, because this has been such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's the end. But the moment has been prepared for.
9 times out of 10.
Thank you very much for listening. And if you'd like to get in touch, or if you've been attacked by baby dolls, then we can be reached at randomizerpodcast@gmail.com, randomizerpod@mastodon.social, or you can watch us on YouTube at tinyurl/randomizer And in all cases, Chaz.
That is randomizer with an S, not a Z.
That's the best he's ever done.
I know, it was wonderful. My delivery was...
Didn't even occur to me, of course. Yeah.
We recorded some thoughts with David and Izzy last night as well, so unbeknownst to me, by setting up 2 recordings for the same episode, we've actually bifurcated the podcast.
Perfect. What better thematic?
I know,
moment
it's like,
could we have than
like
that?
the stars aligned. I've got to make something of that somehow anyway.
Did you feel that the dolls, it felt a Barbarella?
Oh, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. I said to my friend when we were watching it last night, I said, good, we're getting the kids scared again. That's what Doctor Who's supposed to be about. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Terrifying children.
Yeah.
And terrifying children. What?
Oh,
That's
hello.
bizarre.
Is it your birthday?
I've summoned balloons. This happened to me once before in a Zoom call. I can only imagine it's some sort
It's the
of
toy
voice
maker.
control thing.